This topic called completing the square is there's quite a lot that goes into this, but hopefully this will help simplify the process. Completing the square, when we say completing the square, what we're talking about is we're trying to make whatever we have into what is called a perfect square trinomial. And so I wrote one example of a perfect square trinomial, and this is x squared minus 6x plus 9. So that is a perfect square trinomial. It's a perfect square trinomial because the number in front of the x squared and the number at the end are perfect squares. The number in front of x squared is 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. The number by itself is 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So those are both whole number answers. And so this is called a perfect square trinomial. Now, the way that you solve a perfect square trinomial is you take the square root of the first number, which we already did, take the square root of the last number, and so you would have them in one parentheses, so it would be x minus 3 squared, and the minus just comes from the minus in front of the 6. So if this is a plus here, this would be a plus. If it's a minus, this is a minus. And so that's how you solve perfect square trinomials or factor them. So the idea here is this is not a perfect square trinomial because of that number right there, that 2. The square root of 2 is a decimal. And so what we're trying to do is complete it so that it becomes a perfect square trinomial. So what we've got to do is move that 2 out of there, leaving space for something where it would give us a perfect square. So the number in front of the x squared is a 1, and we already talked about over here that that's a perfect square. We have to get a perfect square right here. And the way you do that is from this middle number. You take the middle number by 2, whether it's divisible by 2 or not, doesn't matter. You divide it by 2. So negative 8 divided by 2 equals negative 4. And then you square that number to get positive 16. So you divide the middle number by 2 and then square it. And now we have a perfect square trinomial here on the left. Perfect square trinomial on the left. There's one detail I have to do, though, to make this type of problem work. We know that whenever I have an equation, if I do something to the left side, I have to do it to the right side. And so because I added a plus 16 here to the left side, I didn't make it up, and we have a place it came from, but I inserted that, and so I have to add 16 to the right side as well. So what I get is x squared minus 8x plus 16 as my perfect square trinomial, and that will be equal to positive 14. So now as I solve my perfect square trinomial, the square root of the number in front of x squared is just the 1. Okay, so it'll just be 1x, and the square root of 16 is 4. And because this is a minus, this will be a minus. So x minus 4 squared equals 14. So from here, I'm trying to get x by itself. Now I need to isolate it, meaning I have to get it out of the parentheses. So I've got to take care of these other things. Take care of the squared, I take the square root. So the square root cancels out the squared. And I have to do it to the right side as well. What I'm left with then is x minus 4 equals the square root of 14. Now the last step, to get x by itself, I take x equals 4. Okay. 4 plus square root of 14. I apologize. One mistake. When you take the square root of a number, you have to account for the positive and the negative answers. And so in front of this, there would be a positive or negative. And so this will be plus or minus the square root of 14. That will be true every time you do this type of problem. So you have x equals 4 plus the square root of 14, or x equals 4 minus the square root of 14. So those would be your answers after completing the square. If you have questions, please let me know. Thanks so much. Bye.